They say your whole world changes the moment you become a mother. Mine did too, but not for the reasons I expected. The moment my husband Marcus looked at our newborn twins for the first time, he didn't cry, smile, or even reach for them. He just stared, then said, "We need a DNA test immediately." The room fell dead silent. Then, with the most casual smirk, he added, "One of them's too good looking to be mine." It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I sat there in my hospital bed, holding our newborns, Liam and Ethan, just hours after labor. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My arms tightened instinctively around them. Liam, my biological son, was still soft and slightly pink, his tiny fingers curled into a fist near his cheek, making little cooing noises. Ethan, my adopted son, was just as perfect, though I couldn't ignore the pang in my chest. Neither could Marcus. His eyes narrowed as he stared at them, his smirk never leaving his face. At first I laughed because what else do you do when the man you've been married to for 4 years says something so absurd? But no one else joined in. One of the nurses chuckled awkwardly, more out of discomfort than amusement. My mom, who had been scrolling through her phone near the window, suddenly stiffened. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "What are you even talking about?" He didn't laugh. He just stood there, arms crossed, looking at Liam and Ethan like he was trying to solve a puzzle. His eyes narrowed slightly, and that stupid smirk never left his face. "I'm just saying," he shrugged. Those eyes, that hair, that little chin dimple. I mean, come on. There's no way they both got all the good genes. I felt my cheeks flush, not from the compliment, but from the implication. My chest tightened, like a rope slowly pulling tighter around my lungs. I tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. "So what, you're serious? You actually want a test?" Marcus walked closer to the bed and leaned down to look at Liam and Ethan, just to be sure, he said, like we were talking about checking the oil in a car, not questioning the paternity of our newborn twins. I felt a slow burn crawl up my neck. My hands trembled as I shifted Liam and Ethan in my arms, cradling them closer to my chest. Their warmth was the only thing grounding me in that moment. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mom rise from her chair, arms folded tightly across her chest, her mouth pressed into a thin line. She didn't say a word, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. She never trusted Marcus, not fully, and maybe, in that moment, I didn't either. I looked at my husband, the man who held my hand through every appointment, who painted the nursery pale green and told me we'd name our son after his grandfather, and I saw someone else. Someone cold, detached, suspicious, covering all the bases. He said again with a shrug like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal because suddenly everything felt different. The room, the joy, even Liam and Ethan's soft breathing. It was all undercut by the shadow he had cast. Why did his words hurt so much? Wasn't I enough? Didn't he trust me? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. The moment should have been beautiful. Instead, it was the beginning of something I never saw coming. After Marcus made that comment, everything shifted, not just in the room, but inside me. You'd think after giving birth, your only thoughts would be about the babies, counting fingers and toes, memorizing their little sighs, falling in love over and over every time they blink. But instead, I couldn't stop thinking about him, Marcus, and what he said. We were discharged 2 days later. My mom insisted on staying with us for a while to help, but I knew she didn't trust Marcus alone with me. I told her she was being dramatic. She didn't argue. She just gave me that look, tight-lipped, eyes soft with concern. Marcus, on the other hand, acted like everything was normal. He didn't bring up the DNA test again. Not once. He changed diapers, made jokes, even took selfies with Liam and Ethan for Instagram, writing captions like, "Already got my mini-me." I tried to let it go, to convince myself it had been a stupid joke, said at the worst possible moment. But something inside me had started to ache. A quiet, gnawing kind of ache. The kind you can't point to, but you feel in your bones. It wasn't just the comment. It was how he looked at Liam and Ethan sometimes, like he was trying to figure them out. I caught him one night standing over the crib, just staring. He didn't notice I was watching. His brow was furrowed, eyes squinting a little, like he was searching for something he couldn't quite find. When I stepped into the room, he jolted slightly and laughed it off. "Just wondering when they're going to start looking like me," he said. I smiled, but something about his tone made my skin prickle. Then, little things started happening, things I might have ignored if I wasn't already on edge. A nurse from the hospital, Rachel I think her name was, called one afternoon saying they were doing a routine follow-up. Her voice was polite, but I swear I caught a strange hesitation when she asked for Liam and Ethan's hospital ID numbers. I gave it to her, and she paused for a beat before saying everything was fine. I asked her if something was wrong. She said no, but the way she said it didn't sit right. Later that night, I went through Liam and Ethan's hospital papers and noticed something weird. The wristbands they'd clipped on them at birth. One of the numbers was off from mine. Just one digit. A typo, maybe. But once you start doubting, you can't stop. I Googled newborn ID errors for hours, falling down a rabbit hole I never meant to find. I finally showed Marcus. "Are you serious right now?" he said, laughing. "You were the one mad at me for even suggesting something was off, and now you're acting like the babies might not be ours?" I opened my mouth to argue, but he kept going. "Sophie, you're tired. You just had twins. Your hormones are all over the place. Don't let this get in your head." He kissed my forehead and walked away, leaving me standing there with a handful of medical papers and a head full of doubt. Maybe he was right. But if everything was fine, why couldn't I shake the feeling that something wasn't? I searched through yearbooks, anything I could find. I told myself I was just curious, but deep down, I was looking for something. Something to either confirm my fear or erase it. But there were gaps. No baby photos, no childhood mementos. Just a few adult IDs and his college diploma, which I realized didn't even list a middle name. I'd never noticed that before, or maybe I never questioned it. When I asked him about it later, he laughed. "I burned all that stuff when I was a kid. Remember I told you that?" Had he? I couldn't remember. Every little inconsistency suddenly felt like a thread, and once you start pulling, it's hard to stop. Still, I agreed to the DNA test, not because I believed Liam and Ethan weren't ours, but because I needed proof, not of Liam's identity, but of Marcus's. I didn't say that out loud, of course. I just nodded and said, "Okay." And the minute I did, Marcus exhaled, relieved. That was the moment I realized he wasn't afraid of what we might find out. He was afraid I'd stop asking. The DNA test was scheduled for Thursday. Marcus handled everything, called the clinic, filled out the forms, even drove us there like it was some normal family errand. He was calm, too calm. Meanwhile, I felt like my chest was lined with barbed wire, tightening every time I looked at him. Liam was in his car seat in the back, blinking up at the ceiling, kicking his tiny socks off again. He was the only one in the car who seemed at peace. I envied him. We dropped off the samples, mine, Marcus's, Liam's, and were told we'd get the results in 5 business days. Marcus joked on the way out, something like, "Bet he's 80% angel, 20% trouble," but I barely heard him. My thoughts were already spiraling. 5 days. 5 days to sit in this limbo, knowing my husband thought our son might not be his, and knowing I didn't really know who he was anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed pretending to scroll my phone while Marcus dozed off beside me, but my mind wouldn't quiet down. His fire story about losing childhood mementos kept looping through my head. It felt rehearsed, convenient. Why couldn't I remember him ever telling it before? The next morning, I dropped Liam and Ethan off with my mom and went back to the hospital on my own. I told them I'd left behind a small blanket with Liam's name embroidered on it. Total lie. But it got me past the front desk and into maternity. The moment I saw Nurse Rachel, the one who had looked uneasy after the birth, I felt a jolt of hope and dread. She recognized me immediately. "Sophie, right?" she said, offering a soft smile. "How's the little guy?" "Good," I said, "but I have a weird question." I told her about the mismatched bracelet. The wrong digit. The follow-up call. I expected her to brush it off, but instead her face went pale. I shouldn't say anything, she said, glancing around. But that night, we did flag a potential mismatch. Just for a moment, something in the system glitched and showed two babies under your ID number, but it was cleared. Management said it was a system error and told us to move on. I felt the blood drain from my face. Was Liam ever taken out of the room without me? Rachel hesitated. For a routine check, yes, but only briefly. How long is briefly? She didn't answer. I thanked her, numb, and left the hospital in a fog. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. My throat was dry. The words, "two babies under your ID," echoed in my head like a siren. I couldn't tell Marcus what I'd learned. Not yet. I needed more. So I started digging. Social media, online archives, anything I could find about Marcus's past. I even searched public record databases, which I'd never thought I'd do in my life. It was like I had become a detective in my own marriage. But the more I looked, the more the details blurred. No trace of his high school graduation, no tagged photos before 2012, and oddly, I couldn't find a single person online who shared a memory of him before college, not even a childhood friend. It was like Marcus had been born at 21. I stared at a blank profile photo from an old college alumni page and felt my stomach twist. I had agreed to a DNA test to prove Liam and Ethan were ours, but now I wasn't sure what scared me more. The possibility that our sons weren't his, or the growing fear that Marcus wasn't who he claimed to be at all. The call came early on a Wednesday morning. I was standing in the kitchen, rocking Liam in one arm, still in my pajamas, when my phone rang. The screen just said unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Something in me froze, but I picked up. "Mrs. Evans?" a calm, clipped voice said. "This is Dr. Graham from Greenbrook Medical. We need you and your husband to come in today to discuss the results of your paternity test. In person." "In person?" I asked, my throat going dry. "Yes. It's urgent." My stomach dropped. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded, as if he could see me. Marcus didn't ask questions when I told him. He just said, "Finally," and grabbed his keys. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Liam was asleep in his car seat again, completely unaware of the storm swirling around him. I stared out the window, heart pounding, trying to steady my breathing. At the clinic, a nurse led us to a small private office. It was cold inside, sterile, like they'd sucked the warmth out on purpose. A digital clock on the wall ticked loudly every second, hammering against my nerves. Then Dr. Graham walked in. He was middle-aged, graying at the temples, with a no-nonsense air about him. He sat across from us, opened a file, and paused long enough that I felt my chest physically tighten. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "The results came back, and they are highly unusual." I clutched Liam tighter, suddenly aware of how warm and real he felt in my arms, my anchor. Dr. Graham looked at me first. "Sophie, biologically, this child is not related to Marcus." I didn't even blink. Somewhere inside I already knew that. But then he turned to Marcus. His eyes lingered for a second too long. Something passed across his face, hesitation, maybe even fear. "And Marcus," he continued, voice quieter now, "you are not a biological match for this child. But more importantly, your DNA doesn't match any records associated with the ID you submitted." Marcus went still. I looked over at him, expecting confusion, denial, something. But his face didn't move, not even a twitch. Dr. Graham closed the folder. "We ran a cross-check through our internal system. Your name, your date of birth, even your photo, all of it triggered a federal alert." I felt my blood run cold. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Graham didn't answer. He picked up the... Dr. Graham pressed a button on the phone on his desk and said a single sentence I'll never forget. "Security, we need you in room 4 immediately." Time stopped. I turned slowly toward Marcus, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw the tiniest flicker in his eyes. Panic. But just for a second, then it was gone. What the hell is going on? I breathed. Marcus stood. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You think I'm some kind of, what, con artist? But Dr. Graham didn't flinch. We don't think. We know. Your DNA matched a man named David Langston. He was arrested in 2014 and disappeared shortly after posting bail. The real Marcus Evans died in a car accident the following year. We're not sure how long you've been living under his name. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. The man I married, the father of my children, the man I thought I loved, wasn't even real. As two uniformed guards entered the room, Marcus, no, David, looked at me. Not with guilt, not with regret, but with sadness. Like maybe, for a moment, he'd actually wanted to be someone else. And just like that, they took him away. Out of my life. Out of Liam and Ethan's lives. Out of the lies we were living. I didn't cry right away. Not when they handcuffed him. Not when the door slammed behind him. Not even when Dr. Graham handed me the printed DNA results like some final confirmation that none of this had been a dream. I just sat there, numb, holding Liam close to my chest, his tiny head resting under my chin, like he was the only real thing left in the world. The days that followed felt like walking through water. Everything slowed down. Everything felt heavy. Reporters tried to reach out once the story hit local news. A man living under a stolen identity, posing as a husband, a father. They called it a bizarre paternity case with a criminal twist. I hated that phrase. This wasn't a story. This was my life. It turned out David, Marcus, whatever his real name even was, had been switching identities for years, avoiding debt, legal charges, even rumors of fraud in another state. He wasn't a violent man, at least not physically. But the betrayal cut deeper than any bruise ever could. What kind of person fakes their entire life just to be with someone? And worse, what kind of person becomes a father in the middle of that lie? For a while, I couldn't stop blaming myself. I went through every memory with him, every birthday, every laugh, every "I love you," trying to find the cracks, the clues, the signs I missed. But the truth is, people like him are good at pretending, good at becoming exactly who you need them to be. But here's what shook me the most. Liam was mine. I had feared the worst, that he'd been switched, that I'd somehow gone home with the wrong baby. But after the investigation, the hospital confirmed what Nurse Rachel had tried to tell me. There had been a system glitch, a mix-up, but it was corrected before we were discharged. Liam never left my side long enough to be taken. He was mine from the moment he took his first breath. And yet, in some twisted way, David had used that glitch to his advantage. He fed the doubt, leaned into the confusion, made me question everything, so I wouldn't start questioning him. Clever, cruel, calculated. It took me weeks to say his name out loud, even longer to stop calling him Marcus in my own thoughts. Now, it's just me and Liam. We moved back in with my mom for a while. Angela, who never once said, "I told you so." She just held me when I finally let myself cry. And she holds Liam like he's the whole world, because to me, he is. I filed for an annulment. There were no legal complications, surprisingly. You can't stay married to someone who never existed. Sometimes I still get mail addressed to Marcus. I toss it in the trash without opening it. Other times, late at night, when Liam's asleep and the house is quiet, I think about the man I thought I loved, the version of him that sat with me at 3:00 a.m. Feedings, who painted the nursery pale green, who kissed my forehead before every doctor's appointment. Was that real? Or was that just part of the lie, too? I don't know. Maybe I never will. But I do know this. Sometimes the truth doesn't just hurt. It rips the ground out from under you. It forces you to rebuild everything from scratch, to figure out who you are without the person you thought would be by your side. And in that messy, painful rebuilding, you find something stronger. You find yourself. And in my case, I found Liam. And that's more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever found yourself questioning everything, your relationships, your reality, even your own instincts, just know you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest truths lead us to the strongest versions of ourselves. If this story moved you, made you feel something, or reminded you to trust your gut, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, raw, and powerful stories. If you found this story meaningful, if it resonated with you in any way, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means more than you'll ever know. And who knows, maybe the next story you hear will be the one you needed most. Until next time, take care of your heart and trust it too.